Join the Coven. The Gargoyles were supposed to protect us. But now, I know the truth. A story written by Pyro Girl 8, Part 2. What the hell? I muttered to myself as I stripped off my zip-up hoodie and wrapped the naked child in it, murmuring what I thought were soothing words to it as my mind raced a mile a minute. Not knowing what else to do and fearing someone may show up, I placed the now sleeping infant on a pew and hastily cleaned up the remnants of my clumsiness. I gingerly retrieved the baby and fled to my car, sitting in the parking lot and gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white as I considered what I should do. I should go to the police, I reasoned. Surely they would know what to do. But it's injured. I should go to the hospital, I thought. No, stupid. If you show up with an injured baby with no explanation for where it came from, your butt is going straight to the slammer. I groaned internally, warring with myself over the next course of action. Go home. Wait for Anna. She'll know what to do. I let out a shaky breath, and with a glance at the baby in the back seat, turned the key in the ignition. The engine sputtered and coughed, but refused to start. No, not now, I muttered to myself, turning the key once, twice, 3 more times before the engine roared to life. With a silent thank you to the heavens, I drove down the familiar streets as quickly as possible without calling attention to myself. When Anna walked through the front door a few hours later, I was standing in the kitchen rocking a screaming baby. I had been trying to calm her for over an hour. My head was in even more agony, and I was at a loss for how to soothe the infant. I looked at Anna with relief on my face, hoping she would know what to do. Instead, she stood in the doorway with her jacket half on, staring at me with her jaw dropped. Spencer? She began haltingly. Why do you have a baby? Anna, you're never going to believe this, but I swear to you it's the truth, I told her earnestly, nearly shouting over the infant's high-pitched wails. I quickly relayed the events of the day to her. She sat at the kitchen island, elbows resting on the counter and her fingers forming a triangle against her chin. You're telling me you knocked over a statue and a human baby came out? She inquired disbelievingly. I nodded vigorously. Yes, please, Anna, it won't stop crying and I don't know what the hell to do with it. Anna gave an exasperated sigh and stood from her seat, crossing the kitchen to me and lifting the baby out of my arms. She rocked her gently and cooed to it, her voice slowly soothing the crying child to sleep. Finally, having a moment of silence, I slid into the now vacant seat at the counter. Anna, what the hell do we even do with the baby? If we go to the cops or the hospital, they're gonna ask where it came from. How do I explain that? She frowned at me. Was this the only one? She asked. I don't know, maybe the church has some shady stuff going on. If there's other kids, maybe it's some sort of human trafficking deal. I pondered her words. I had been too startled to check the other statues, but she made a valid point. If there were others, it would free me from any guilt. I'm due back in the morning. I can check then. I'll take Leon with me, get another set of eyes on it for confirmation, I reasoned, knowing my longtime friend would back me up. But what do we do about the baby tonight? She asked. I'll run out and grab some formula or something quick, and we'll just, I don't know, make it a nest on the floor? I was completely lost on how to care for a human baby, but figured between the two of us, we could make it to morning. I ran to the local convenience store and bought the formula. When I arrived back at the apartment, Anna and I took turns trying to feed the baby, but it wouldn't accept any of the sustenance and only seemed to grow more agitated as we continued to try. Finally, we gave up and decided to just let it sleep. We set up a small cocoon of pillows and blankets on the floor next to our bed and delicately placed the baby in the center. Exhausted, Anna and I collapsed into the bed and were asleep in no time at all. It may have been a dream, but at one point during the night, I was roused from my slumber by a sound. A soft creaking, grinding noises permeated the otherwise silent bedroom in the dark, and from the floor, I could swear I saw 2 glowing red eyes. The next morning, I awoke before Anna and the baby. I quietly slipped out of bed, snatched my clothes from the chair, and snuck out the bedroom door, taking care not to disturb them. As I made myself a quick breakfast, I shot a text to my best friend Leon. "Hey man, you up? I need a favor." His response came before I had even set the phone back down. "Yeah man, what do you need?" I frowned down at the cell phone in my hand, unsure how to explain it in a way that he wouldn't immediately think I was insane and turn me into the cops. "Meet me at the church in 30 minutes. I headed out to my car, sliding into the driver's seat quickly and starting the car. Just like yesterday, the engine groaned and shook, but wouldn't start. "Damn it, really?" I muttered to myself, furiously turning the key over and over in the ignition to no avail. "What the hell is wrong with you?" I said, addressing the inanimate vehicle as I pounded a fist against the dashboard. Finally giving up, I exited the car with a vicious slam of the door. I zippered my jacket and shoved my hands in the pockets, grumbling under my breath as I trudged down the road, resigned to the long walk to the church. As I walked down the streets, deserted so early in the morning when the sun had barely peeked its head above the horizon, my eyes were drawn to the imposing stone gargoyles that lined the roofs. No longer did I feel protected by the immobile guardians. Now, as I walked the street, I felt vulnerable, exposed, as if every gargoyle lining the roofs was watching me and waiting to pounce. My heart hammering in my chest, I quickened my pace, eager to escape the all-seeing eyes of the gargoyles. I passed the flower shop I had visited last night, frowning as I noticed some sort of commotion from inside. I paused a moment before heading inside. "Mr. Brenner, everything all right?" I asked as I entered, freezing as I took in the sight before me. All the flowers in the shop, even those stored in coolers, were wilted, rotting messes. A haggard Mr. Brenner was studiously clearing out all the waste, his face distraught. "Spencer, hello. I'm sorry, I don't have anything to sell today. I'm not sure how this happened. Refrigeration unit must have gone or something," he said, tossing what had once been a beautiful rose table decoration in the waste bin. "I'm so sorry to hear that. I need to get to work, but I'll stop by later if you need a hand," I told him. My parents have been good friends with him, and it would have felt wrong to leave the elderly man to clear out the entire shop himself. "Thank you, son. Get to work. I can handle things here," he said with a smile. I exited the shop once more and resumed my early morning trek to the church. I kept my eyes cast downward, not wanting to see the looming figures perched high above the street. When I arrived at the church, I saw Leon's SUV parked alone in the lot. As I approached, my friend exited his car, a green knit cap pulled over his short brown hair and a grin on his face. He handed me a to-go cup of coffee and shoved his free hand in the pocket of his gray sweatshirt as he sipped his own. "So, what's going on?" he asked, cutting right to the chase. Leon had never been one to beat around the bush or mince words, and I was grateful for that now. I took a deep breath before delving into the tale, explaining the figure I had seen running through the hallways at the back of the church, the room filled with grotesque statues, and finally, the baby. I could tell by the look on his face that he was skeptical. Let's be real, he was probably considering if he had time to call the cops before I came at him like some deranged animal. Well, let's see, take a look then, Leon said, giving me the benefit of the doubt. I nodded and led the way forward, ascending the concrete steps to the sturdy double doors. I pulled my keys out of my pocket to unlock the door, dropping the ring from my shaking hands. Cursing under my breath, I stooped down and retrieved the keys, fumbling through them once more before finding the one I needed. I shoved it into the keyhole and turned it. A hollow click resounded as the doors unlocked. Shoving the keys back in my pocket, Leon and I made our way down the aisle between the pews. I glanced around the empty, cavernous nave nervously, waiting for some unseen evil to spring out and eat us whole. We were silent as we entered the back hallway and approached the last door. So, they were in there? Leon asked uncertainly. I nodded, swallowing past the lump in my throat, as I stepped forward and pushed the door open, bracing myself for what I knew we would find in there. Except the room was empty. I stared in disbelief, not believing my eyes. Leon, I swear they were here. I rushed forward into the room, scouring every nook and cranny for some sign that what I saw had been real. A breath of relief escaped me as I took in the floor. Dozens upon dozens of round imprints in the thick layer of dust on the floor assured me that the statues had, in fact, been here. Leon crouched down and swiped his finger through one of the rings, smudging the dust into a spotless portion of the hardwood floor. So, someone moved them all out? I frowned, looking around once more. But where and why? I gasped, spinning around to face my friend and shoving my hand through my dark hair in distress. You don't think they know, do you, that I broke one? Leon shrugged, standing up and crossing his arms over his chest. It's possible, but wouldn't they have come for the baby if they did? Maybe they don't know it's you. Just that someone messed stuff up, he reasoned. I nodded, agreeing with his train of thought. You're probably right, which means we need to get out of here before they realize it was me. Leon nodded, halting me as we exited the room with a hand on my shoulder. You do realize what this likely means, right? I frowned, turning around to face him. What do you mean? Leon's face was grim and his tone somber as he spoke. It means the church is involved in something shady they don't want anyone to find out about. The baby, everything being moved when you came back, means they knew someone had seen what they were doing and are trying to cover it up. I clenched my trembling hands into fists, pushing aside the unease that was building inside of me. So, what do we do about it? Our proof is gone. No one will ever believe this. And if we tell anyone without proof, the church will know exactly who we are. Leon nodded, walking forward with me once more. We need to find where they moved everything. As we turned the corner, I briefly caught sight of a dark figure exiting towards the nave, just like yesterday. Leon, did you see that? His eyes wide in surprise, he nodded, sprinting down the hall with me. A faint sound, almost like the flapping of wings, echoed through the nave. We ran into the expansive room, shocked to find it empty. They gotta be hiding somewhere. Let's be careful, Leon said. I gaped at him, whispering back, Leon, are you insane? We need to get the hell out of here. My words fell on deaf ears as Leon was already sneaking forward, peeking under pews. I hastily checked the confessional and any other potential hiding spots, coming up empty. As I met Leon back in the aisle between the pews, the sound of giggling bounced off the arching ceilings and floated down to us. We both froze, the dread inside me built with the pounding of my heart as we slowly glanced upwards. Dozens of monstrous gargoyles sat perched above the nave, their stony expression sneering down at us. We stood immobile, not even daring to take a breath. Another giggle through the church, and then another, until a cacophony of cackles resounded in through the room. Leon turned to me, his expression panicked. Spencer, what is happening? I shook my head at a loss for words. Come on, man, let's just leave, I whispered pleadingly. He nodded, and together we tentatively headed towards the door. When we were only a few paces from the door, the taunting laughter changed. The voices in the room changed to the high-pitched wails of 100 babes, all shrieking in tandem. I slapped my hands over my ears to block out the piercing screams. I glanced at Leon to see his face twisted in a similar expression of agony, his hands clasped to his head. Leon! I shouted over the din, jerking my head towards the back of the church. Together we raced down the aisle and into the back hallway. The wails slowly began to quiet the further we got from the door, until it was once again eerily quiet. The silence was almost as painful as the shrieks. It was as if the something were waiting to see what our next move would be. What do we do now? Leon finally asked, his voice a hoarse whisper. I shook my head. I didn't have an answer for him. Haltingly, I meandered down the hall, peeking into the rooms for any sign of a presence. One door stood closed, this time not the room that held the gargoyles, but a room I remembered from my snooping yesterday to be an office. Leon's eyes met mine, and we nodded a silent agreement. He approached the door and turned the knob, but it wouldn't open. It feels like something's wedged behind the door, he said, ramming his shoulder into the door in an attempt to force the object loose. On the third try, the door swung open and Leon crashed into the room. I muttered a curse and rushed into the room to see Leon in a heap of limbs and shattered marble on the floor. The gargoyle statue must have been placed behind the door, and forcing it open had sent it tumbling to the ground. Leon groaned from the ground, and I extended a hand to pull him to his feet. Thanks, man, he said, brushing off his sweatshirt. That's when the too familiar sound of a baby's cries rose from the pile of broken marble on the floor. You've got to be kidding me, Leon muttered before kneeling down and delicately scrounging through the rubble. A moment later, he lifted a small, naked baby from the floor, holding it outstretched from his body as if it might bite him. Spence, what do we do with a baby? He exclaimed, and I couldn't help but let out a nervous laugh. Now you see why I brought you here, I replied. He tentatively brought the wailing baby closer, resting it against his shoulder and awkwardly bouncing in an attempt to quiet its cries. Damn, man, we need to go to the cops, Leon began. He opened his mouth to continue, but the words never left his lips. I saw a familiar flash of gleaming red eyes as the baby reared its head back, its mouth stretching far too wide for a child, and its teeth far too sharp as it lunged forward and sank its fangs into my best friend's throat. It sucked greedily, grotesque snarls emanating from the creature before it yanked its head back once more, tearing a chunk of flesh from Leon's neck. I screamed, terror and shock crashing over me in waves that battled for dominance of my emotions. I stumbled backwards out of the room, hearing the thud of Leon hitting the floor and his dying gurgles. The abomination hunched over Leon, reveling in his feast. As I watched, too stunned and aghast to move, the skin of the baby's back began to ripple and churn. Suddenly, in a burst of blood and sinew, two enormous webbed stone-like wings erupted from just below its shoulder blades. My hammering heart finally spurred me into action, the flight response overtaking me. I began to run toward the nave, but the shrieking howls picked back up the closer I got. I skidded around and raced back down the hall, seeing the open door of the empty room that had housed the gargoyles before me. With only a moment of hesitation, I picked up speed, braced my arms in front of my face, and vaulted out the window in a shower of glass. Tucking my legs and rolling down the hill behind the church.